Hi, I'm John Earnshaw. In this video, you're going to learn the best way to choose a research topic. Now, you probably already know that choosing a good topic is very important because if you get a bad topic, it can slow things right down and cause all kinds of headaches. On the other hand, if you find a good topic to write on, your research can progress very quickly and your research can be a very enjoyable experience. So what I'd like to do is start off by talking about the challenges that you face when you go to choose a research topic, because most students don't understand how difficult choosing a good topic really is. Now, the first piece of bad news is that in high school you never really had any practice at finding good research topics, because the papers you wrote in high school really weren't research papers. They merely summarized existing knowledge on a topic. Now, in higher education, there's a very important distinction between existing knowledge and new knowledge. Existing knowledge is what we currently know about a topic, and in your classes you would spend time focusing primarily on existing knowledge, and in your exams or studying for exams you try to memorize as much existing knowledge as you can. But in your papers, when you're free to pursue a topic of your own choice and write a research paper on it, you should be pursuing new knowledge as opposed to summarizing existing knowledge. And a good analogy that illustrates this is the analogy of the jigsaw puzzle. With a jigsaw puzzle, you have gaps. As you can see, there are 2 gaps in this puzzle, and then you have the picture that's beginning to take shape. And as you work on the puzzle, you're supposed to focus on the gaps, because it's filling in the gaps that is really what your goal is. And in the same way, in research, your goal is to fill in the gaps in our knowledge on the topic that you happen to be interested in. And that's why finding a research topic is really finding a gap in knowledge that you can focus on and try to fill in. The second piece of bad news is that finding a knowledge gap is really quite hard. Finding the gaps in a puzzle is easy. You just look at the puzzle and the gaps jump out at you. But finding the gaps in our knowledge of a topic is hard because you have to do a lot of reading with a critical eye. That's the only way you're going to be able to tell where the authors fell short in some way, not interpreting the evidence correctly or not digging deep enough or whatever the shortcoming is. You have to do a lot of work just to find a research topic. So it's not like in high school where you don't know anything about a topic, but you choose the topic anyway and then begin to learn about it. When you're doing research, you have to know a great deal about the topic area before you can spot the gaps in that topic. And that's why it's very hard. The third piece of bad news is that you don't have time to do this. During the semester, you have 3 months or less in which to find your topic, do the research, write your paper, format the citations and all of that. But it's going to take 3 months just to find a topic if you do it properly, if you do all of that reading to find a gap in knowledge. But you just don't have time. So what you're doing when you don't do all of this reading, but you do make a topic selection, is you're working blind. It's like covering your eyes, walking up to a jigsaw puzzle, and putting your finger down somewhere, and then opening your eyes to see where your finger landed. You don't know where it's going to land. It could land on one of the pieces that's already in place, in which case you're kind of like the high school student who's just doing a summary of a topic, and the paper is really not a research paper, it's just a paper that summarizes existing knowledge. Or you may choose a topic that is a gap in knowledge, but there may not be enough evidence for anyone, you or a professional scholar for that matter, to come up with the answer to your question. The fourth and final piece of bad news is that if someone else does all of the work to identify a knowledge gap, and if you want to focus your research on that knowledge gap that someone else has discovered. Unfortunately, that gap may close very quickly because the person who discovered it is usually the person who takes the first crack at trying to fill the gap, trying to answer the research question. And if they're successful, then there's nothing left for you to do, at least on that exact research topic. So if someone publishes a book and you're reading the introduction about the problem or the knowledge gap that this person has discovered, you'll probably also find in the introduction the author's proposal as to what the answer to the research question is, and then the proof in the rest of the book. So if the person is successful, then the knowledge gap opened, but immediately it closed, and there's no opportunity for you to do research on that same topic. Well, I think it's about time that we had some good news after all of this bad news. And the good news is that there is something that keeps knowledge gaps open. And that something is disagreement. If you have a scholar who publishes something and hopes that everyone's going to accept his or her conclusions, but not everybody does, then you can have a disagreement arise when someone publishes a different view, a different answer to the same research question. So what happens in those situations is that the disagreement keeps the knowledge gap open, keeps the issue a live issue, one that is worth discussing, and that means that you, as an undergraduate student or as a graduate student who has to write a term paper, in a very short period of time, can capitalize on these situations where you have someone else who discovered the knowledge gap, who did all of that work and all of that reading to find a knowledge gap, but because of the disagreement, the knowledge gap has not closed yet, which means that it's an ideal issue for you to focus your paper on. So disagreements keep knowledge gaps open, and therefore the best way for you to find research topics, if you only have 3 months or less in which to write your paper, is to find a disagreement. The best way to find research topics is to find disagreements. Now in the next lesson we're going to be talking about sources, finding sources, but it's going to be very closely tied to what we've talked about in this video, because where do you find disagreements? You find them in sources. So I hope you'll be looking for that video in your email, and I want to thank you for watching this video. Take care.